The hallway camera faces our apartment door, number 608, at Halloween night. The soft relay click that tells us the lift has stopped at our floor. Then our door opens 3 inches, no hand on the knob, just the scuff of the chain catching. A child's voice slips out, too gentle for the hour, Appa, and then a second voice answers in the same tone. My tone? Exactly my tone? I'm right here. The door shuts. The camera keeps watching a corridor that now holds its breath. The producers don't use it because we can't agree on what we're hearing. They say echo, I say confession. I'll tell it once, calmly, like they asked, so you can decide whether the city itself did it to us or whether I did. 15 Halloweens ago, the city wore its favorite costume, a power grid pretending to be alive. Streetlights flickered in a slow Morse code. Neon signs strobed above the closed shops, and generators hummed like distant beehives. We lived on the 6th floor of a long gray building with a rusted service lift that paused on every floor, whether you pushed the button or not. My little sister, Mina, was 10 and worshipped rituals. She lined shoes in ruler-straight pairs, matched lids to containers, stacked storybooks tallest to shortest, and made me swear to let her hand out candy at the door. She'd saved coins for weeks and bought a costume from the thrift store, a velvet witch's cape stitched with dull sequins and a rubber pumpkin half-mask that smelled like damp cardboard. Our mother worked nights at the hospital 3 blocks away. I was 19. If you've ever been 19 in a city that shakes its loose wires and whispers, "Do your worst," you know how brave and how stupid that feels at the same time. The year before, kids had banged on doors and vanished, laughing into stairwells. This year, the building association put a paper sign in the lobby. No trick or treating after 9 p.m. Keep hallways clear. Somebody wrote cowards across it in orange chalk. On the morning of the 30 Honest, orange chalk showed up at our door too. A word under the number 608 skittered, eager, a child's hand but not Mina's, knock. "Isn't that fun?" she said. Her eyes reflected a kind of light the city couldn't make. Child light, the kind that believes the world is organized on purpose. We'll play the knock-knock game. I wiped the chalk with my sleeve. It dusted my skin like pollen. I should have told the super. I should have told my mother. I should have told anyone. Instead, I told myself a story about buildings, that their bones creaked, that nothing inside them was ever truly awake. Stories are soft prisons. You can sleep in them while the guard walks past. At 7:02 p.m., the first knock arrived. 2 light taps, like a child practicing the idea of knocking. Mina raised the chain, opened the 3 inches, and held out the jelly beans we'd poured into a bowl shaped like a plastic skull. On the corridor camera the producers pulled later, you can't see the kid. The lens doesn't cover the immediate threshold. All you see is Mina's small hand, the bright jelly beans in her palm, and the shadow of another hand reaching for them. A paper wristband flashes. The kind the clinic gives you. I watched that clip 20 times later and told myself the band meant nothing. By 8:20, the hallway had grown louder. Teenagers stomping in cheap masks, frantic elevator bells, somebody upstairs dragging furniture like a slow crime. The skull bowl emptied faster than we expected. I added a bag of toffees my mother hid for tea, and we kept going. Knock, chain, candy. Thank you, knock, chain, candy. Thank you. At 8:57, 3 knocks came hard and close, knuckle to wood in a rhythm I still hear when the kettle starts to boil. Ta-ta-ta. Mina went to the door. The chain rasped, the 3 inches opened, and I heard a voice say, warm as a big sibling's, "Little witch." I stepped into the hall. No one there. The lift's glass panel framed my warped reflection and the red 6. Our neighbor's potted snake plant swayed as if someone had brushed it with a coat. The corridor was neither empty nor full. Cities are like that. They inhale people and never exhale them all the way. Who was that? I asked. Mina shrugged. A dad, she said, giddy. He said my costume looks real. Then she gave me the look. She gave everything she wanted me to approve. The look that says, tell me the world makes sense. I nodded once. That nod is the worst thing I've ever done. At 9:15, the building overreacted to its own sign and scared itself. The hall lights cut out. The recessed exit green stayed on, a small square soul. Down below, the generator coughed, coughed again. Someone let out a happy, scared whoop. A firecracker popped outside, followed by 3 more, then a dog screaming at joy it couldn't let itself have. I told Mina to sit on the couch and keep the pumpkin half mask off, because the rubber made rashes bloom on her cheeks. The TV's battery backup kept the screen alive, but with no picture, only sound. Somewhere in the walls, water ran, then stopped. Our apartment wasn't haunted. Pipes simply remembered that they once carried rivers. I picked up the cassette recorder our mother used to capture lecture notes. Black plastic, worn edges, a red button that clicked like a trigger. Call it paranoia. Call it a journalist's daughter's habit. I set it on the hall table and pressed record. If someone was playing games at our door, I wanted proof. At 9:28, we got it. 3 knocks. The chain lifted. The 3 inches opened. I stood back and watched the shadow pull long across our entryway. Mina's voice, happy, cut off by the other voice that had my heat, my air, my exact timbre. I'm right here, Mina. My throat closed. For an absurd second, I thought I'd spoken without knowing it. But my mouth was slack, my tongue dull. The recorder word. Who are you? I asked the gap. The voice ignored me and spoke only to her. Your sister's tired. I'll take it from here. The paper wristband slid into view again, and a hand, not a child's, pinched Mina's jelly beans as if selecting the red ones. I tried to yank the door open. The chain dug into the slot like a trapped live thing. The shadow withdrew. The knocks did not come again. We listened to the tape. We played it back 5 times. My voice was on the other side of the door. The night guard, Kareem, had a face that always looked like the punchline had just arrived, but he was too tired to laugh. He came up crowding apologies and cheap answers. Kids with phones, he said. They record a voice and play it on the other side. You know these TikTok pranks. He made a little box with his hands, like he held the exact device and had confiscated it before. I will check. He checked nothing. The lift jammed on 5 for a while, then remembered 6. A neighbor hissed that her door had been egged. Another neighbor said eggs were too expensive to waste and accused her of staging it. I told Mina to sleep with her bedroom light on. She insisted on taking the pumpkin half-masked bed like a shield. I stood at the foot of her bed and watched her breathe. Slow, fast, slow, until my neck ached and the city traded its costume for dawn. In the morning, orange chalk bloomed under our number again. K-knock, but this time with something written beneath in a careful grown-up hand. When you hear your own voice, D-O-N-T, answer the door. You can build a universe out of those rules. If you need to, do not answer what sounds like you. Do not welcome what wears your face. Do not invite your echo inside. I told the super. He said teenagers. I told our mother. She said the hospital had a case, an overdose of something a teen bought stamped with cartoon ghosts, and she was too tired to play superstition with me. She kissed Mina's forehead, mine, and rolled a cart of laundry into the hallway. The chalk notes smudged under her wheel, and the warning blurred until it looked like a blessing. I started hearing myself everywhere that week. At the lift, the distorted speaker crackled before the doors opened and issued a soft, breathy, going down in my cadence. In the milkman's stall, a radio played an ad for something no one's ever needed, a home voice assistant you could train with your own recordings. The actress's voice matched mine between breaths. At the seamster's, he bent over a hem and hummed a note that fit the core of my throat like a key. The mind is tidy. When it meets a mess, it can't mop. It just labels the mess pattern. Once you see the pattern, it feels like safety. I told myself, of course you hear yourself. You are listening for you. Then, a second chalk note, midnight, 608. Repairs. The handwriting was Karam's, neat, old school, the kind learned with ink you had to feed. He shrugged when I asked. Water heater checks, he said, whole stack. When we opened the door at midnight, he stood there with his ring of keys and a flashlight too bright for his budget. The beam sliced the corridor. Dust glittered. He looked past my shoulder at Mina asleep on the couch under a blanket, the pumpkin half-mask on the coffee table like a split fruit. I'll be quick, he said. He left wet footprints in the hallway, though it hadn't rained. In the bathroom, he tapped the tank with a wrench like a doctor testing a knee. Don't answer knocks after 9, he admonished on his way out. Even if it sounds like someone you know. He said it lightly, like gossip about a hallway flirt. I wanted to ask how he knew. I wanted to say, why is your paper wristband still on? But the word that came out was thanks, and I shut the door with a grateful smile that felt nailed to my face. The city saves itself for holidays. 2 weeks later, the makeup off and back on again. October 31 came around like the perimeter of a clock. If you live near hospitals and schools, Halloween refuses to be a foreign idea. It learns your routes, adapts, becomes an excuse for kids to test bravery and adults to test lies. We bought better candy. I made a different plan. We would not open the door. We would pass candy under it in little zip bags like neighbors exchanging contraband. Mina found this fun enough to accept. I slid a towel under the gap to firm the slot and keep roaches from believing in us. At 7:40, 2 knocks came on the wall from apartment 606. Our neighbor, a film student, had hung a drape and was projecting something slow and black and white. Watch The Haunting with us, she texted. It's polite scary, not scream scary. I almost said yes. If we had crossed to 606 that night, the rest would be footnotes. If we had. At 8:31, the 3 hard knocks landed in their old rhythm. Ta-ta-ta. I had set the recorder again. I pressed my hand against the wood to feel for breath. It's nothing I could prove in a court, but warmth bled through. Not body warmth, radiator warmth, old building warmth, the kind that carries past tenants and their stovetop prayers. Little witch, the voice breathed. My voice. Mina looked at me, seeking the nod I'd given too easily before. I didn't nod. Say the rule, I said. She swallowed it. When you hear your own voice, she whispered, don't answer the door. We didn't. We slid the candy bags under the door until they stopped disappearing. We waited out the polite curfew, then the impolite hours. I read to Mina from a ghost-free book about river deltas until her mouth unknotted and she slept on the couch again, this time with a mask covering her eyes like a coin on the dead. At 11:53, the recorder caught a sound I can't put category to. Not a knock, not a voice, not a scrape. More like someone exhaling into their cupped hands. Then the doorknob turned once, twice, stopped. Go away, I said to the wood, calmly, documentarian calm. Then a whisper from the corridor said, with my exact patience, I will, when you do. I had the sudden dizzy sense that the corridor was inside our flat, and our flat was inside the corridor, and the city had folded us like laundry into our own container. I counted to 100. The counting brought me back. Counting always does for people like me. When I looked for Mina on the couch, the blanket was a ghost with no bones underneath. The pumpkin half-mask lay crooked on the cushion. The front door chain hung slack. The door was ajar. The lift had stopped at M. Even though our building officially had no M, the button panel had simply decided to make room. I took the stairs anyway, because the lift's glass could hold reflections I wasn't ready to be part of. Between 6 and 5, The concrete stairwell devoured the building's original paint and the dust of 100 renovations. Someone had sprayed a small pumpkin near the landing. Someone else had tried to scrub it off. The orange bled like rust. I called Mina's name first in a whisper, then louder, then holler that bounced back at me small and shamed. At floor 3, the door to the service corridor was wedged with an upside-down mop bucket. The M light glowed behind it, bright as a dare. I squeezed through, the recorder in my pocket still spooling tape. Service corridors are the city's throat. Pipes, valves, the kinked arteries of everyone's bad habits. The maintenance floor, if you want to flatter it, was one long room cut into smaller rooms by cages of chain link and plywood. A single fluorescent tube hung at an angle. It hummed. Hums can feel like warmth when all you have is a cold idea. The first cage held crates of tiles crowded with spiders. The second cage held a folding table, a roll of duct tape, a bottle of orange chalk in a mason jar labeled pylons. The third cage held photographs. They were taped to plywood in neat grids. At first, they were landscapes. Our street, our corner store, the bench outside the clinic, the hospital's parking lot. Then they were closer. Our building, our floor, our door. Then, closer still, Mina's shoulder at the peephole, Mina's hair caught in the hinge, Mina's wrist on the chain, Mina's hand offering candy through 3 inches of permission. Whoever took them had stood in the legal nowhere of a hall and obeyed all rules but one. I turned, in time to see a figure 2 cages down lower something to the floor. A pumpkin half mask. Not ours. The same cheap rubber, same damp smell, but cut to fit an adult face. The figure wore a paper wristband with our clinic's logo, the same I'd seen on the camera. I opened my mouth and heard the voice that had haunted our door. My voice, say from my own throat, steady and practiced, Mina, come here. The figure turned. He, Karim, blinked at the tape recorder in my hand like a cat eyes a red dot. A key ring glinted at his belt. You've been leaving the chalk, I said. Calm. You used the clinic's wristband to look harmless. You copied my voice from the tape I gave the super after the first night. You stood in the hall and spoke my sister's name like you owned it. Why? Calm is a shape rage takes when it puts on a tie. He watched my mouth as if tracking a bird he wanted to catch without scaring it. I kept you safe, he said. It was the first time I heard his real voice, dry, older, from a long way back in his chest, from long before, from what you don't remember remembering. Where is she? He gestured past me with the keys. I listened but heard only my own breath and the old lung wheeze of the building. I reached for the cage's latch. And then, finally, the city told the truth. Room 6M did not exist on any plan, but every building has one. The room where you put what makes you yourself when you no longer want to share it with the world. It had an old cot, a basin, a small desk. On the desk, a cassette deck and a pile of labeled tapes. Mina singing, Mina laughing, Mina sleep, Mina alone. The labels were in my handwriting. No, that sentence deserves its own paragraph. The labels were in my handwriting. On the wall hung a paper printed with building regulations, laminated against the kind of spills a true believer makes. In the margin, someone had written with orange chalk, count to 100, breathe, do not open the door when your voice cocks. I pressed play on the nearest tape. A lullaby filled the room, out of tune, familiar. It was me at 19, doing my best mother impression, coaxing sleep out of a stubborn night. Little witch. I heard myself croon, and then my taped voice told the taped child, your sister's tired, I'll take it from here. In the cage reflection, I watched myself understand. Karim stood still, hands at his sides. We made a rule, he said, 3 years before that Halloween, when your episode started, when the doctor used a word you wouldn't keep. I showed you this room. I said I would take tapes when your mother worked nights. And you recorded yourself for Mina. So if your voice came to the door, she would know she was still safe. No, I said, because the body rejects new bones as if they were knives. No. You left them at my desk to keep, not to use. But then you stopped coming. You stopped taking the pills that made you slow and kind, the ones that pinned your shadows to your feet. So he swallowed. I knocked. I used your voice so Mina wouldn't be afraid. I never came in. I never took her. I stood at the door and gave her the jelly beans you didn't want her to have. That's all. Where is she? I asked, the words clawing. Now, tonight. He turned his palm upward like he was offering me a coin. She's in the one place you locked, he said gently, because you were the one who left a door open before. I ran. There is a second kind of door in old buildings. Not a door at all. A square with a latch low to the baseboard that used to be a laundry chute but now is a regret. Ours had been sealed when we moved in, bolted. But bolts are just promises, and promises are just words, and words can be persuaded. Under the kitchen sink, behind the bin, I found the square. The bolt was bruised metal. My hand knew the way it turned, because my hand had turned it once, years before, on an afternoon when the city was so hot, the air refused to sit still. I saw it then, how I had shown Mina the secret, how we had giggled, how I had said, only when I'm here, how a knock at the door had drawn me away, how the city's throat had opened and accepted an offering without a sound. Kareem's footsteps behind me were soft, careful not to arrive before I did. I dropped to my knees. I pressed my ear against the square and heard nothing. Then a small dragging noise. Then a whisper, Appa? I pulled the bolt. The panel stuck, then swung. Cold soot licked my fingers. A smell came up like wet dust and old detergent. Mina, I said, calm. Calm like an interview. Calm like an autopsy report. Calm like the opposite of the scream pressing between my ribs with both hands. Reach up. Her fingers found mine. She had wedged herself on a ledge where the chute crooked around a beam. I braced my feet. Kareem braced me. And together we dragged the city's oldest mistake into our kitchen. She was shaking and blue around the nails, but alive. She had her pumpkin half-mask clenched in her teeth, the rubber strip stretched and chewed almost through. She looked at me with a question so large it used up the room. I answered it with the smallest truth I could manage. We are okay. Kareem stood in the doorway, his paper wristband limp with sweat. He looked older than he had half an hour ago. No one comes down here after 9, he said to the floor. The building doesn't like it. I nodded because I couldn't unlearn what I had learned. Because I had invited myself to the door in 100 different ways before that night, and the city had obliged. You want an ending you can pin to a board. The producers do, at least. They want me to say Kareem was the villain or a savior. They want me to say the building was haunted by a vagrant or by poor municipal planning. They want the little graphite cone inside the microphone to vibrate when I say closure. Here is what I give them on camera. A city at midnight. The corridor to 608, the chain that keeps us good. My voice recorded. My voice live. A child's hand. An old building's mouth. Here is what I give you now. We moved out the next week. A year later, the building renovated the maintenance floor and unnumbered the room. The new super wears his keys like jewelry. Kareem left without fanfare. He did not leave me a note. He did not have to. The orange chalk has been discontinued by the vendor the mason jar came from. Sometimes I see the exact shade under my nails anyway. Mina grew into a woman whose hands still measure before they move. She counts to 100 before she answers any text after dark. She keeps one tape from that room in a shoebox. Mina sleep and plays 3 seconds when she can't. The 3 seconds are just my breath between words. Sometimes she calls me after and we breathe into the phone at each other until one of us remembers who learned to breathe first. The documentary ends on a slow dolly back from a hallway. The hallway, they say, not ours, but one dressed the same. The sound designer added a knock-knock track stitched from dozens of apartments across the city. If you listen closely, it is the sound of someone trying to enter when your hands are full of all the things you thought were yours alone to carry. I'll say it here, because this isn't the film and I promise to be brave. The first time Mina slipped toward that chute, the first time I listened to a door that spoke in my voice, it was not Halloween. It was 3 years earlier, on a nameless afternoon when I had stayed awake too long and the world's edges overlapped. I had taken pills the doctor said would keep my shadows tied down. I had stopped taking them because I liked the way my mind felt when it could take off its leash and run. I had taped myself laughing and singing and telling stories because I wanted to be the kind of sister who could be in 2 places at once. I had left the tape with Kareem for emergencies, and then I had made everything an emergency. That afternoon, I heard my own voice call me to the door from the bathroom. I had recorded a list of groceries for myself and left the recorder on. I followed my voice because it made sense to follow the map that sounds like home. I left the kitchen. I left the bolt. The city opened its mouth. Kareem found Mina before I fully understood what mouth she'd fallen toward, and he closed the bolt with hands steadier than mine. He told me we needed rules. He wrote them in chalk because paper tears and ink lies in a way chalk doesn't. On Halloween years later, I told myself a better story. I made a villain from a voice and a wristband. I made a plot from an old room and a pile of tapes. The city helped. It always does. But the truth, the part that knocks in my own cadence, is that I called to my sister with a voice she trusted, and she came. I did it by leaving doors inside me ajar. I still sleep with the recorder on the table by the hall. I still press the red button when something in me wants to open. On the worst nights, it captures nothing but the sound of my breath, the long mechanical spin of tape, and one small familiar word coming from a mouth I must live with, mine, bent around the oldest magic we have, a name, Mina. If you came looking for a ghost, I'm sorry, I can't give you one. On Halloween, the city put on its mask and I put on mine, and when we both took them off, the face underneath was mine again. But you came for a rule you can tuck into your pocket like a saint's medal? Take this. When you hear your own voice on the other side of the door, do not answer. Count to 100. Breathe, and then ask someone who loves you to knock. Because sometimes the scariest thing is not what wants in. It's what wants out. Last week, the anniversary, someone knocked at 608 again. Not our door, we don't live there. It was the door of the studio where we recorded the last interview. The producer rolled his eyes and made a joke about marketing. The intern went to open it. I counted to 100. At 98, I heard it. The voice that braided my present and my past until both felt like the same length of rope. My own. Calm as a documentary. Tired as a mother at dawn. Little witch, it said. Affectionate but firm. I'll take it from here. And I did.